it's week 3. We're going to continue our focus on situating creativity this week and focus specifically in on finding creative inspiration, which is something we'll all be doing for Creativity Quest 2, which I'll introduce after y'all turn in Creativity Quest 1. In this video, I want to talk a bit about inquiry and research and invention as parts of creative inspiration, and then I'll talk about our week 3 readings, cases, and sparks. My PhD is from Michigan Technological University, about 8 hours north of here in the Upper Peninsula. This is a photo I took on my street the first year I lived up there. One of my favorite times of year is Winter Carnival, held in February on campus and through town since 1922. Each year had a theme, and student groups create sculptures based on that theme using only snow and ice. Here's a snow sculpture from Winter Carnival in the 1960s, from the 1980s. One from when the theme was a frozen commotion from the depths of the ocean, from 2007 when the theme was ancient worlds and modern day. One from 2008, and you can see the amazing ice prison that the designers created to hold their snow and ice werewolf. This year's theme is Discover What Shines from Prehistoric Times, and I'm really eager to see how people enact the theme in their statues and sculptures, again, created completely with snow, water, and ice. I share all this because I think it resonates well with this week's focus on finding creative inspiration. In this case, in prepping for Winter Carnival, the students go through extensive processes of researching the year's theme to identify what sort of concept they want to articulate through their sculpture. They had to research weather conditions and monitor the temperature carefully. They had to research the weight of the snow and how it would change based on additional snowfall and temperature, and much more. Their work involved creative inspiration through research that spanned from history and culture to engineering, architecture, meteorology, and much more. At Michigan Tech, I studied rhetoric and technical communication. In our culture, rhetoric has a bad reputation. We often hear people throw around things like, "That's empty rhetoric." However, rhetoric is a pretty powerful tool for communicators. Anna Oasis and Ellen Lupton, two design scholars, defined rhetoric first by drawing on Aristotle, who saw rhetoric as the ability to select among and apply different means of persuasion. When Aristotle talked about rhetoric, he was talking about guys in ancient Greece delivering orations out in a public square. Oasis and Lumpton jump us to the present, though, by arguing that rhetoric is a set of tools to help us communicate across modes and media. And I mentioned this in class last week. You can have the best idea in the world as an entrepreneur, a supply chain management student, a finance student, an advertising student, a writing student. But if you can't communicate that idea is going nowhere. To communicate ideas, you first have to understand rhetorical considerations, which include the context in which your ideas are going to be experienced, seen, or read. Purpose, or what your communication is meant to do, what the outcomes could possibly be, and most important, the audience. The ancient rhetorical canons are invention, arrangement, style, and delivery. And I want to talk specifically a bit about invention because it's a key part of the creative process. We're going to talk more about creative processes later in class. For right now, I want to share some examples of engaging in research to find creative inspiration. And research isn't just something you'll do in school, and it doesn't just happen in academic databases or at the library. Research is something you'll do the rest of your life. Every time you approach a new task at work or get assigned a new role or seek out a new job, you'll do research. And research is key to creative inspiration. And by this, I mean that creative inspiration doesn't just happen magically. We have to engage in processes that creatively inspire us, looking for examples, talking to others, observing practices, drafting materials, and more. So with inspiration in mind, I want to share with you some examples of creative inspiration. One of my favorite sources of creative inspiration is Zay Frank, and here's one of his instructional videos.
In our personal and professional lives, sometimes we receive emails that are upsetting, like this one I received last week. Dear Zay, regarding the designs you sent, it was a good first attempt. However, your use of color and typography feels a bit childish and out of date. We'd like you to meet with our in-house designer so we can educate you on our design philosophy and show you some better alternatives he's come up with, Alex. Now, my first instinct is to respond like this. Dear Alex, please tell your in-house designer to shove his alternatives up your... I don't end up sending these emails. In fact, I send something quite different. Something like this. Alex, of course I'm perfectly willing to accommodate any changes. Let's set up a meeting with your designer ASAP. I'm sure we'll be able to figure something out. How does that sound? I look forward to working with you on this. Zay. Now this bottles up a lot of anger, and eventually we take it out on the things we love, like our cell phones or our digital cameras. But there's an alternative. It's called punctuation substitution. As you can see, by associating punctuation with simple phrases, you greatly increase the vocabulary at your disposal. Returning to the email we just saw, it now reads, Alex, you vacuous pussbag. Of course I'm perfectly willing to accommodate any changes, you minuscule twit. Let's set up a meeting with your designer ASAP, or not. I'm sure we'll be able to figure something out, or not. How does that sound, idiot boy? I look forward to working with you on this piece of crap. Zay. Bite me, jackass.
I love this for the content. It's hilarious, it's smart, but I also really like this because of the way he split the screen and used himself to point toward his email. I found this piece when I was researching how to best deliver a presentation I wasn't going to be present for. And this was before YouTube. So I planned to burn a CD for participants, but I didn't just want a CD with a generic PowerPoint on it. I borrowed this approach in the video I created using the same technique of turning myself toward the material I was reading to try to make for a more engaging presentation.
Hello DMACers, I'm Danielle Nicole DeVoss from Michigan State University, and I'm sorry I can't be with you for the workshop, but I wanted to share some materials with you. So, first, the arguments. More and more, we're asking students to move away from the double-spaced page set in 12-point type, and instead asking them to gather, to weave, and to choreograph multiple media into multimodal text. And this type of composition means that notions of authorship, collaboration, and ownership need to change.
A student in a document design class I teach is another great example of creative inspiration and research. He ran role-playing games with his group of friends, and the game they played was set in the 1920s. He wanted to have some documents that would be part of the game he was setting up, but he wasn't sure what CIA documents looked like before computers, when everything was handwritten or typed. So he researched classified, top secret, and confidential historical CIA and FBI documents for models for his game. Another student I worked with wanted to create an identity marker, essentially a personal logo to brand his professional portfolio. He wanted people to associate him with logic or logical, so he did a search for logos that play on the idea of logic. And one final example of creative inspiration is from a student who was working on the design of her honors senior thesis, which was a collection of short stories. She went to Amazon.com and searched for other collections of stories on similar topics to hers, gathered covers, and based her cover design on the elements she liked the most. And what I want to emphasize here about finding creative inspiration is that all these projects involved research. And invention doesn't just happen at the start of an idea or project. You will invent, you will research, and you will create across all phases of a project. One of our readings for this week is a set of excerpts from a book called Inspiration Equals Ideas, for which the author chose some professionals, specifically graphic designers, and asked them to share with her how they found inspiration in their everyday lives and work. You'll see in this reading that research happens between people, in the context of technological change and across different digital spaces. Think of last week's focus, and also think of Pinterest, which I would argue is a sort of research-oriented space. Research can happen across media and in the context of different theories and cultural histories, and inspiration can be found all over the place. In the document design class I regularly teach, I encourage students to be human satellite dishes. That is, don't just shuffle through the world. Pay attention to the information feeds around you. Listen to people, look at posters, flyers, advertisements, web pages, digital content, the materials that surround our lives, packaging, boxes, bags. Engage the world. Don't just walk through it. I hope that thinking of invention and research as tools for creative inspiration helps situate you to this week's focus. All of our readings, cases, and sparks have to do with finding creative inspiration. First, we're going to read a chapter called Innovation Begins with an I. The chapter reports on the research practices of IDEO, an international design and consulting company in California. And in the chapter, the authors write about IDEO's process for creative inspiration, which begins, they argue, with observation as a research process. The second reading is from the book I just mentioned, Inspiration Equals Ideas. The first creativity case is a curated selection of 9 interviews with creative visionaries. Take a look at all 9 and then choose one to read at length. We have 2 creativity sparks. The first is old. It's a short film called The Powers of 10, which helps us think about how perspective shapes our experiences. Creative thinkers are able to consider things from different perspectives and different vantage points. The second creativity spark is a little bit odd, I'll admit. It's a wedding announcement, but I think the piece is stunning in its implementation of creative ideas, from its color scheme to its typography to its hand-drawn graphics to the ways in which the designer technically implemented HTML5. I've actually gone back to the story of Jess and Russ several times as an inspiration source. For instance, once I was working on an invite to our department's end of the year reception, I remember seeing an animated keyboard on the website. I went back to the site and watched it a few more times, then started drafting and playing with the keyboard as the main image idea for the invite, and the final invite looked like this. I just want to remind you that pack-back participation is a required component of class. 10 weeks out of our 15 weeks together, you need to post 1 question and then 2 responses to questions other people have posted. You'll get 300 points full credit if you participate fully. You can't wait and post all your questions and responses in the last week or 2 of class. You need to stay on top of it. For each week you choose to participate, you want to post your question and your 2 responses that Sunday by midnight. So for instance, this is week 3. So if you choose to participate on Packback during week 3, your question and your 2 responses are due by midnight on Sunday, January 26th. You should be keeping up on your own Packback participation. You can use Packback to figure out how many questions you've posted and how many responses you've posted. Otherwise, about 4 times during the semester, I'll post your current points in D2L so you can keep track of your participation that way too. As you explore the week 3 materials, participate on Packback, and continue to work on Creativity Quest 1, reach out, email me, let me know if you have any questions.